as we started with Professor Betts, he said that he believes Ireland will be the first country to go to full civil war. So let me begin with a story. 9 days before Christmas in 2023, fire services were scrambled to Killigill House in the pastoral village of Roscahill in Connemara, a beautiful tourism spot in the west of Ireland. It was built in 1863 by an Anglo-Irish landlord, and the historic house was set ablaze after more than a week of protests, which saw locals barricade roadways to the house with felled trees, tractors, and so on. Word had spread throughout the village, close-knit community of 300 people, that 70 immigrant men of unknown origins were to be placed in a disused hotel under the government's International Protection Accommodation Scheme, IPAS. The next day, after the fire, Ireland's Deputy Prime Minister, Micheál Martin, denounced the burning. He tweeted out, quote, "There is never any excuse or place for violence, hatred, or intimidation. Those responsible for this criminal act do not speak for their community or the country." The Prime Minister at the time, Leo Varadkar, added, quote, "There is no justification for violence, arson, or vandalism in our republic, ever." Now, as defiant as Varadkar and Martin were in the wake of this Killigill House burning, a simple fact remained. Killigill House had survived the ravages of the Irish War of Independence and the Irish Civil War, which saw 300 Anglo-Irish landlord houses burnt out. But it couldn't survive the first coalition government of Ireland's self-proclaimed centrist parties. As of August 2024, there were at least 31 fires at proposed or rumoured IPAS centres across Ireland. The most of these were in Dublin, with the majority of the fires reported between 2023 and mid-2024. The escalation in arson at these sites was matched by the state in their use of violence to put down demonstrations close to centres. Tensions flared because the government enacted a no consultation and no veto policy of forcing large groups of mainly Arab and African men claiming refugee status into historic close-knit communities. Communities were left with no legal recourse, and it was not uncommon for buses of immigrants to arrive in the middle of the night and for communities to wake up with their demographics completely and utterly changed. The totalitarian and utterly undemocratic actions of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael backed locals into a corner. That the Republic of Ireland could be plunged into a civil war was, for the first time in a century, a very real and distinct possibility. Hotels had a dramatic effect on communities along the western seaboard, where I come from, who are disproportionately dependent upon tourism for economic survival. As of February 2024, all of the top 10 towns or villages with the most Ukrainian refugees in Ireland were located in the western seaboard. The Irish Tourism Industry Confederation in 2022, at the end of 2022, estimated that 28% of all tourism beds outside of Dublin had been contracted by the government to house Ukrainians. And that same organisation estimated that €1 billion would be lost to the Irish tourism sector in 2023, which it was, and again in 2024. The extraordinary sums of money that were given to private hoteliers were such that by May 2024, a local paper, the Clare Echo, reported that private individuals were buying up properties in North Clare with the express interest of leasing them out to the government to the detriment to the wider local economy. Quote, this is our Justice Minister. As a first step, all applicants are photographed and fingerprinted. These fingerprints are then checked against the Eurodac database. And many of you will know Eurodac is an EU-wide immigration database which stores the fingerprints of asylum applicants, so it can be cross-checked to see who has crossed borders illegally. However, one of the few investigative journalists in Ireland, Niamh Vrian, followed up on the Justice Minister's claim and found that between 2015 and 2023, no Irish authority had ever accessed Eurodac for the purposes of investigating serious crime. When another independent minister asked how many asylum applicants' fingerprints were checked against Europol, she responded that the Irish police do not input asylum claimants' fingers into Europol. point is, no meaningful vetting of asylum claimants to Ireland have been performed in the past 20 years. And it gets even worse than that. It further transpired in 2022 and 2023 alone. Nearly 9,000 individuals presented at Dublin airport seeking asylum with no or falsified documents, with only one case being prosecuted. And in those same years, 2022 and 2023, the majority of asylum claims, 27,000 in total, came from non-EU countries, predominantly Africa. And again, when pushed, the Justice Minister admitted that no meaningful background checks were carried out on non-EU applicants either. Again, to quote her, "It would be in breach of our responsibilities in respect of refugee protection to contact the consular authorities, as doing so may have the consequence of making such authorities aware of an applicant's presence in the state and their claim for international protection." These exchanges simply proved what many Irish had long suspected. Ireland is a de facto open border state. And the masses of single men who have been forced into small, ancient, close-knit communities around Ireland are entirely unvetted and entirely unknown entities. Despite this, successive leaders, beginning with then Prime Minister Leo Varadkar, adopted this ruthless policy of no consultation with local communities and no veto on behalf of the communities when busing these immigrants in with drop-offs, as I said, often happening in the dead of night. Now, these are the circumstances that have led to violent confrontations in towns such as Newtown, Mount Kennedy, where police pepper sprayed and baton charged locals, as well as in Clonmel and Coolock. Most recently, before Christmas, a riot erupted outside of Ireland's largest asylum hotel in Dublin after a 10-year-old girl was allegedly raped by an African asylum seeker on the grounds of the hotel. When an Algerian immigrant stabbed a 3-year-old outside a school in central Dublin in November 2023, it ignited a riot which saw mass civil disobedience, buses and police vehicles set alight, and scenes previously thought unimaginable. And I had certainly witnessed nothing like it in my lifetime. Critical effects this massive population explosion has had has been to lead to the worst housing crisis in the history of the state. At present, 40% of employed, not unemployed, not general, 40% of employed young Irish people between the ages of 20 and 35 live in their parental home. That's in stark contrast. So just to give you an example, in Germany and France, that number is 12% of young people living at home. And in Sweden, it's 2%. So 40% of Irish people are being forced to live at home despite working. As a May 2024 report by Eurofound reported that 61% of all young Irish people between the ages of 15 and 29 were either planning to migrate or wish to migrate to another country within 3 years. This is the highest figure for any EU nation. Medium term, there'll be no grand romantic uprising. There'll be no reenactment of 1916. Instead, Ireland will have to endure what the rest of Western Europe has endured for the past number of decades. A steady rise in violent crime, sexual assault and murder, already evident in official data, and a breakdown in high-trust communities. As the Irish government has made no effort to break up ethnic and religious groups when forcing them into small communities around the country, Ireland will have to endure inter-ethnic conflict related to drugs, gang, and social and economic discrepancies amongst integrated groups and between unintegrated groups and natives. In 25 short years, Ireland has followed the rest of Western Europe in making the same mistakes that they made in their initial waves of immigration policy decades ago. Ireland's most energetic, angry, and conscious of the problems facing the nation are forced to either forget Ireland entirely or simmer angrily abroad. For a new Ireland to arise, the most angry must remain. Quite a task for a nation with centuries of emigration encoded into its psyche. All major parties are left-wing in Ireland, with the editor of that, Professor Owen O'Malley, stating that Ireland's political landscape was, quote, among Europe's most left-wing. Ireland then needs a populist right party and a movement in the style of Sweden Democrats and her successful cousins in France, in Germany, Hungary, Italy, and elsewhere. Ireland needs to establish a right-wing beachhead in Europe's most left-wing nation. It is the only deterrent against Ireland's social decline and possible descent into civil war.